you know, when we do the kiddush, so it's very, very interesting because the blessing on the wine, which usually in a meal we only say one time, and even if the balabait said it, and we thought of being yoitze, even if we drink wine afterwards, we don't say the brocha. So suddenly we say the brocha quite a few times. So it's very different. But if during the meal we drink more wine, which is not kedai because we have already 4 cups, and it's a mitzvah to drink most of the cup. So it's kedai during the meal to drink water or something else and not wine. But if you drink wine during the brocha, during the meal, you don't make a brocha again. But you say the kiddush, and then at the end of Magid, you have a brocha. At the end of the meal, you have a brocha. At the end of the Agoda, you have a brocha. 4 cups. It's the only time when it's kedai to have cups that fit exactly the amount you want to drink, which is a certain amount depending on your minhag. If it's Chazonish, if it's Rav Chaim Noe, whatever, you ask Rabbi, you ask husband, your son, whoever you want. But it's the only time that the mitzvah is not just to drink the amount, but to drink rov kos. On Shabbos, if you have a cup of soccer, which contains 5 gallons, you can make kiddush on it and drink just the amount that you need. I say on purpose a joke because it's huge. But on Pesach, besides the amount, there is a mitzvah to drink the rov kos, the maximal part of the cup. Therefore, if you have a smaller cup and it's enough, then when you finish the cup, you didn't drink more. But if you have a very, very big cup, even if it's beautiful, but you have a very big cup, and you try to drink rov kos, you won't manage to drink the 4 cups because it's too much. So be careful to have cups which are big enough, but not too big. You understand? It's the only time we have a mitzvah of rov kos, not just rov revis. Okay? What is very, very nice is in the Kiddush itself, we have Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim. You know, when I teach girls the Birkot HaShachar, so I always ask them all kinds of questions connected with Shelo Asani Goy. Why don't we say just She'asani Yehudi? And here too, he doesn't just say he loves us, he chose us. It's from amongst the nations. In other words, the election of OUisrael is something which we mention all the time because it's not just protectia, but it's an obligation the whole time to be an Am Kadosh. You chose us from the nations because we have an obligation, we have an achrayus, we have a responsibility to be an Am Kadosh. And for example, when we say, V'romamtanu mikol halashonot, you made that our language is a higher language than all the other languages. And that's why you even have people, it's so interesting. Hello, Joy, and hello, Miriam. Bryna, you were there from the beginning. Hello.
Hello.
V'romamtanu mikol haloshonot means that you have to be aware that it's a different language than all other languages. We have halachot connected with languages. For example, we don't say shalom in the toilet or in the bathroom or in the washroom. Why? Because shalom is one of the names of Hashem. We don't say the name of Hashem there. So when you have some Hasidim, some Satmar, some whatever, they don't speak Hebrew, they speak Yiddish, or in the olden times Aramaic, or I don't know what. I don't think that was a reason for Aramaic, but Stam, it's even though we do speak Hebrew, but we have to be careful that we don't just dirty our tongue with the language. All this is from the beginning. The first thing that we do is Kiddush. Kiddush is a concept that we have to be Mekadesh ourselves. And on Leila Seder, it's very, very fascinating because we are now getting out of the tomb of Egypt, and we, for the first time, have to be worthy of having been chosen from all the nations, of having, it's not stam, it's not protectia. When Avraham Avinu is chosen, why is Hashem giving him 10 tests? Not because he doesn't know who is Avraham, but one of the reasons is because when the nations will hear that he passed all those tests, they'll understand that it's not stam protectia, I like this one more than the others. It's because you proved yourself that you're above all the nations. You get it, huh? And straight after V'romamtanu mikol haleshonot, you elevated us above all languages. You chose us from all the nations, and you sanctified us, but you helped us, not stam sanctified. You sanctified us through your commandments. And you gave us, and then on Yom Tov we say, Be'ahavo, all the Chagim. The Chagim are reminding us of events where Hashem showed that he loves us. So it's fascinating. It's fascinating, okay? And that's why at the end we say, Baruch Atu Hashem, Mekadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim. That's the Chagim. So with this, I gave you a tiny bit an awareness that we don't just say with the Balabait, the Kiddush, without thinking. Already at the beginning, we are bombarded with very deep ideas from the beginning, okay? Now, this is one thing that I wanted to say. If you have questions, please ask me. That's why we have a live that you can stop me, you can ask questions.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. My
Yes.
daughter speaks English in the bathroom to her children.
Beautiful. Who is speaking? I don't see.
Brianna.
Miriam or Brianna? Brianna.
Brianna.
Yeah.
My name is Brianna. B-R-I-A-N-A.
No, Brianna. I know a Brianna. That's why I made a mistake. Brianna. Okay.
Yes.
But it's a beautiful idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful idea because you have to be careful. I told you once, there was in the Binyane Ha'uma in Jerusalem, an evening, for many years they did it, now they stopped doing it because they saw that people come less between Corona, war, money, everything, and now it's not there anymore. It's a lot of places are making shurim on Lashon Hara, but against Lashon Hara. But there is a beautiful time. There was a beautiful time where Rabbi Loewenstein spoke about a very, very beautiful idea. And the idea was the concept that that the same mouth that is going to say Hashem Svatai Tiftach cannot be a mouth that has dirtied itself. So dirtying oneself is Lashon Hara. Just a second, I'll tell them to go less strong. Yeah, thank you. You have Lashon Hara, but you have as well Shmirat HaLashon, to keep your tongue, but you have as well the dirty words, Shem Hashem, things that said in the wrong place and the wrong moment, swearing in vain, saying bad words or something. All this is connected with dirtying the mouth, the same mouth that is going to say later on, Hashem Svatai Tiftach, Hashem, help me open my mouth so that I can daven. You can't use it. And he was giving an example, which if you don't remember, I can give you, but which is very, very famous. Okay, so you remember the example of the Tsar of Russia that was eating French food? No? The Tsar of Russia was eating French food and it was so fantastic. And it was kishke or something like that. And he asked his man to ask for the recipe. And he asked the recipe and he did it, and it was as bad as ever, even worse. So it happened a few times until they re-asked the recipe, and you have to take the membrane of the intestine of the animal and fill it with very good food, with, you know, with eggs and with flour and with grease of the animal, etc., etc. And it was still horrible. So what had happened, he had forgotten one little thing, to wash that membrane. of the intestine. So the intestine was full of already digested food, but still in the stomach. And on this, he had added food. So, of course, it was horrible. So that was a nimshal that if you have the dirt in your mouth, you can't daven. Me, it has helped in Lashon Hara and in all kinds of gossip in life. Just this example, it's so horrible that you think to yourself twice, okay? But now we have a very interesting paragraph, which is Maaseh Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon, Shahayu Mesubim Bivnei Brak. The story of Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Tarfon. And they were sitting in Bnei Brak, and they were speaking and they were saying the Yetziat Mitzrayim, because the only day we have a mitzvah not just to remember Zachor, Yetziat Mitzrayim, which we say every morning, all the things that we have to be Zachor. Now we are going to have this Shabbos, Parashat Zachor, that will be Amalek. But so we have we have a mitzvah to remember the story of Egypt, the Yetziat Mitzrayim. But here it's V'hayu Mesaprim, the only ones that not just remember, but to tell the story on and on and on and on. This is Yetziat Mitzrayim. We don't have a mitzvah to remember anything about Amalek, to tell the story of Amalek. We have a mitzvah to remember Amalek, to destroy Amalek. That's a mitzvah. But here, Hayu Mesaprim, Sipur, Yetziat Mitzrayim, Kol Oto Alayla, until the Talmidim came and said, sorry, and they knocked on the door and they said, it's already time of Krishma of the morning. Okay, you remember this paragraph, right? So let's see just how fascinating it is, how Torah puts people together. I am very European. I'm French, in fact, which is even specific in the world of Europe. In other words, Switzerland and Belgium and Zurich and Antwerp and sometimes Manchester are more in common. French are very different. And I'm talking about the Ashkenazi French before politically all the Sephardim came to France. Now they are 85% or 90% of the French Jews. But because a lot of the others have been destroyed by the Shoah or have moved to other countries and to Eretz Israel a lot after World War II. But very, very interesting. How is it that I could marry an American? It's such a different culture. Because the main culture of a Jew is the Torah. And it puts people together. And those 5 rabbis are so different from each other, from such a different background that without the Torah, they would not speak one word together. I once read a Goyish story, beautiful, about 2 guys that in the army become deep, deep friends. But the father of one was a big banker, huge banker, and the father of the other one was a guy that empties the garbage with a truck. And after the war, they had promised each other they'll remain friends for a lifetime, and they did not. It was very, very sad, because life did it that they had totally different friends. It didn't happen, you understand? Hello, Fegi. It happened. It doesn't happen that usually, perhaps in a story or an affair, but not a marriage. It's very rare that the daughter of the garbage collector should marry the son of the biggest banker who is going to inherit a few banks. Okay, so this doesn't happen. It should not happen. I don't know if it doesn't sometimes happen, but in honest people, in good people, it happens much less in the world of Torah. Let's see who they are. Rabbi Eliezer, he's here only mentioned Rabbi Eliezer, but it's Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkenos, who was a teacher of Rabbi Akiva, the Rebbe of Rabbi Akiva. And he was such a brilliant person that he had very different ideas than other people, to a point that since the halacha is in the Gemara, that at the end of the day, it goes according to the majority. When he said, but I am the right one, and he did not bow down his head to go according to the majority, because his geniusness made him realize that he's surely the right one in something, in a halacha. So he was put to cherem, because you have to go according to the majority, not today, but in halacha in the Gemara. And for many reasons, which are very clever and very psychological, but this is a halacha. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkenos was one of 5 boys. The father was a wealthy agriculture, and Rabbi Eliezer had not learned till the age of 28. Perhaps that's why he became the Talmid of Rabbi Akiva. He understood what Rabbi Akiva went through. But he wanted to learn Torah, and his father said, it's much too late, forget it. If you didn't begin at 3 years old, you won't make it. Until Rabbi Eliezer ran away, learned by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, became the biggest of the biggest of the biggest. His father, at the end of his life, came like Kalba Sabua, the father-in-law of Rabbi Akiva, came to, he didn't even know if he's alive anymore. He wanted no relationship with him. And his father-in-law came to give away his inheritance. And they asked, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai asked him, what's a chat? He said, because I had a son, but he went off the derech. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai asked him, and if he would have become a big rabbi, I would have been the happiest of men. I would have given him everything, etc., etc. And at that moment, he made Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkenos. The father was called Hyrkenos. You see the influence of Greeks and Romans already at that time. Mishnah, Gemara, that's Mishnah. Hyrkenos sounds Greek, right? And he is very, very interesting. And he was overwhelmed. And then they made him realize that it's his son-in-law, and he cried and he gave him everything. Rav Ovadia Yosef, when he was young, his parents didn't want him to marry who he married. His father-in-law was called Rabbi Fatal, and he was a much more simple Jew. He was a Talmid Chacham, and he was a religious person, but he was much simpler than Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, who had a genius brain. But the father of Rav Ovadia Yosef was selling vegetables in the market. It's very, very different, okay? It's very, very funny. So why did he not want him to marry into Rabbi Fatal's family? Because they were poor. And he was very poor at the beginning. And at the end of his life, when he became the chief rabbi of Israel, I don't think that he was missing anything. I don't think he did it because of money or anything. But Rabbi Akiva or Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkenos inherited very late in life whatever they had to get. But they had proven that they can make it as well with nothing. Like it says in Pirkei Avot, Pat b'melach tochal u'mayim b'msura tishteh. Just a piece of bread and a little bit of water should be enough. It does not mean that a person has to do it and to sleep on the floor, like it says. It means that if that's the price you have to pay to be able to learn Torah, you should do it. But if you cannot do it, of course not. It's not very agreeable to eat only bread and never protein, never anything. And it's not very agreeable to sleep on the floor, on Tisha B'Av maximum, but not all the time. But it means that should not be preventing you from learning Torah. You understand the idea? Okay? So that's Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, who began late. Rabbi Akiva, you all know the story. I don't have to speak about it. Rabbi Tarfon was, I'll tell you exactly who is Rabbi Tarfon. Did I miss somebody? Rabbi Eliezer. I missed one before. Before Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, I have Rabbi Yoshua. And Rabbi Yoshua, his full name was Rabbi Yoshua ben Hanania. He was a Levite. He was a Levi. And he's as well one of the students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. If you go to the kever of Rabbi Akiva in Tveria, so you have behind all kinds of Tanaim, names of Tanaim, and you have there Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. It's not famous because they are not sure that here is exactly the kever, so they put a few names of Tanaim, and one davens there with a machshava that this is their kever. Whereas Rabbi Akiva, and next to him, who's next to him? Who is next to, in Tveria, who is next to Rabbi Akiva? The Ramchal. Rabbi Akiva is almost 2,000 years ago, 1,950 years ago, and the Ramchal, who wasn't even in Israel so much, is Rabbi Ramchal is Mesilat Yesharim, Derech Hashem.
Luzzato?
Huh?
Luzzato?
Luzzato, כן, רמח"ל, רב משה חיים לוצאטו, רמח"ל, רב משה חיים לוצאטו. And nothing to do. It's end of the 17th century. What's going on? Bizarre. The time of the Gaon Vilna. So what's the connection? So I once heard something beautiful. He was 40 years old when he died. And they put him next to Rabbi Akiva to be metaken the 40 years that Rabbi Akiva didn't learn Torah yet. Because he began at the age of 40. It's a very interesting idea. Okay, so he was one of the disciples of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. And usually in the Gemara, when there is a halacha that he says, and another rabbi, he's the one does his Yoshua. It's his opinion that is decided. He was very poor. So already it's interesting because we have Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and Rabbi Akiva, who at the end of their lives are not poor. He's very, very poor. He was working in making tools, by melting iron, something very, very hard. We have a lot of those Tanaim. We have them that fixed shoes. We have those that were, in mythology, Vulcan. I don't know what it means. How do you call it? Somebody who makes tools. He's a Rav of most of the Tanoim of his generation. Then we have, after Rabbi Akiva, we have Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva. Then we have what I said, Rabbi Tarfon. And Rabbi Tarfon is a Kohen. So you see, Rabbi Akiva descends from Goyim. His father was a proselyte. And on the other hand, Rabbi Tarfon is a Kohen from the time of Aaron HaKohen. And Rabbi Yoshua is a Levi. So you see, Rabbi Tarfon was already alive when the temple was still. You see, they say that Rabbi Akiva, you remember Rachel speaks to Rabbi Akiva and he doesn't want to learn Torah because the fact that they learned Torah did not prevent the destruction of the temple. So Rabbi Akiva is really a generation after the destruction of the temple. And Rabbi Tarfon is older. And Rabbi Tarfon, still as a very young one, served in the Beit HaMikdash. And later on, he worked with Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva a lot. He's rich. He's a Kohen and he's rich. And one of the very famous students of Rabbi Tarfon is a very, very poor man who was called Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai. If you go not far from Tzfat and somebody goes and davens at the kever of Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai, who was so poor that in his generation, 6 people were under one talit, which means that you had one blanket for many people. So how was there enough? So Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel, who passed away 10 years ago from the Mir, the one that made out of Mir the biggest yeshiva in the world, a little bit bigger than the city of Lakewood, Yeshivat Mir in Yerushalayim, 7,000 people sitting and learning. It's impressive. There are shops around, especially food shops or other things, that close when there is Benaz money because they have nothing to do. Because the only people that buy is the Yeshivat Mir. When you have 7,000 clients, you don't have to. You can close when they're on holiday. During the summer, they close. And why did I say this? Yeah, he said, how can one blanket suffice for so many people? And the answer is when everybody pushes towards himself, there is never enough space. But when everybody tries that the other one should be covered, we find enough place for everybody. And there is a famous story of Nosson Tzvi Finkel was very, very sick. He had a very bad case of, he was, how do you say, when you tremble? Help me. You tremble so much that you
Parkinson's.
can't. Parkinson's, thank you. Sometimes the words don't come out because I just give before a shiur in French. And this morning I was in a school in Hebrew, so sometimes I'm tired. Thank you. So it worries me, but what can I do? Meanwhile, I continue. So it's very, very interesting. Rav Nosson Finkel was refused medicine because he didn't want that it should blur his mind. So he had a very clear mind, but he was very impressive by the fact that he was so sick. And a millionaire came and they showed him in Shiva Smear. And then they brought him to Rav Nosson. It's said, it's brought up in his biography. And they asked the man, how many people do you think work in this establishment? They showed him a huge place. So he said, oh, 350. There must be 350 directors and under directors and vice directors and this and this and this. And how much space for all the offices of all those people? And he said a huge number, etc. And they showed him that there were less than 20 people working to organize the whole yeshiva, less than 20 people, more than 7,000 people, and as well, 2 or 3 rooms, I mean, for the officer, I mean, absolutely nothing. And the man could not understand. So he asked, how can? And he gave an answer of that message, like when everybody works for everybody else, you know, you don't work for just the kavod and everything, you need much, much less than the other things. Okay, so that's a very, very interesting thing. This is the story of the period of Rav Yehuda Bar Ilai. Rav Yehuda Bar Ilai himself was very poor, and I was once at 2 or 3 in the morning at his kever, and I saw a bunch of people there with lists of people. The people can't come at 2 or 3 in the morning there, but there is a segula. They say that if your name is brought by the kever, it's a segula not to be as poor as him, to be rich. I don't know if rich, but not to be poor. So I was wondering, because thousands of people give their names. So what's happening? So I saw the guys that are in charge of doing it. They have lists of, let's say, 300 people. They spend 2 hours there. They say every name. They just say the name. And in the end, they say it should be as good as that they should have parnosen. You understand? So I was there for about 2 hours, and there were about 10 people saying about 300 names by his kever. So if you give some money, your name will be said by somebody at his kever. You understand? So that's Rabbi Tarfon is rich and is a teacher of Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai. So we have all of them. Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon. Yes. So you see, you have rich and poor, Kohen, Levi, Israel, and Bnei Gerim, and they're all together. And I wanted to know if Bnei Brak is the same as today. So I found that it's in the territory of Dan. So it's more south. If you have once a map with a division of the tribes, for example, in Sefer Yoshua or in some Tanakh, you have it, how was the conquest and everything. It's situated in the territory of Dan. It's brought in Yehoshua Perek Yud Tet. Yoshua divides the land according to the Goral, according to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it's not far from the Bnei Brak of today. At the time, it became very famous because Rabbi Akiva made a yeshiva there, which is very, very interesting as well. Okay, and they were telling the story, Mesaprim, and Mesaprim and Sipur is the same word. Mesaprim is to tell a story, and Sipur as well is a story. Okay, but the fire is the same letters. And they were speaking so much Torah that it was lighting the night as if it's day. Mesaprim, you understand? In other words, meaning that they didn't need light. At night, the Torah was the light. Ki ner mitzvah v'Torah or. Right? La'Yehudim hayta ora v'simcha v'sason bikar. We're going to have on Purim before the next year. And or, Chazal say, or is Torah. Because when you learn a lot, so there is light in the room. Of course, it's an idea. It's not, don't try it, it won't work. But you understand, okay? So this is one thing that I always like to say. And then I'm skipping the one at this moment. If we have more shiurim, perhaps I'll do it. The one which is really the explanation of a Mishnah, which is Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah. That's the one that they wanted to make him Nasi, and he was 18 years old, so he was too young. So he had a miracle, and in one night, he had a white beard. I have heard those things. I have heard people doing such things. You understand? Is it disturbing you a lot, the noise behind me? Is it disturbing you a lot?
Not a lot, but is there
Little
a
bit,
way to
huh?
get rid of it?
No, because I don't have the place where I have a good, where you hear me well is a kitchen, and there is no door where I moved.
Ah,
I'm dying to have a door, and there is a whole group learning in the salon. So
okay, so we'll live with it, that's all.
so we are going to try to. Usually, it's not at the same hour. It's people from Chutzlar, they want it specially. So okay, so Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, he made a whole uh, discussion when is a mitzvah to learn and to tell the story of Pesach, day and night. And he goes into a whole thing of the Mishnah. By the way, he says, Hari ani kevem shivim shana. I'm like somebody who's 70 years old, which of course on a pshat level means that he's very clever and he knows a lot. But on a midrash level, that his beard became old in one shot. You know, that sometimes somebody that looks a little bit older than his age, you know the joke. A woman that has age is an old woman. That's what she is, an old woman. A man, yeah, when he looks a little bit older, he becomes a gentleman. Now people take him seriously. Okay, isn't it sad? It's that's the way it is. What can we do? Okay, okay. And now we have Baruch HaMakom Baruch Hu, and this is introducing the four sons. And the four sons is fascinating. That's fascinating. Okay, so the four sons is very, very nice. I'll finish a tiny bit earlier today, exceptionally, because of the people in the salon, which I have to say goodbye to. But we have the four sons: Chacham, Rasha, Tam, She'eno Yodea Lishon. 1 second, I'll tell them to be a bit quieter. Okay, so we have the four sons. So the four sons are fascinating. First of all, we have to know where it comes from. You see, the Torah does not bring the story. If you remember the whole Torah, it does not bring the story of four sons. It does not. So where do we have it from? And now you'll understand what is the Haggadah. The Haggadah is like a text already explained. The text of the Haggadah is an explanation. We have four places in the Torah, different places, which I'll tell you, which is very, very interesting, where it says, when your son will ask you, or when your son will tell you, or when your son, doesn't say Chacham, Rasha, Tam, She'eno Yodea. It just says your son. It just says your son. And one time it doesn't even say your son. It just says, you will tell your son. So the Baal Haggadah was a genius. It was Tanaim, most of them. He says, when your son will say, what kind of son can it be? From the answer, he's going to invent, to make a perush, what kind of son it should be. Do you understand? So the Torah just tells you that there is a son that is asking you, Ma'edot v'chukim v'mishpatim, or whatever, yeah? And then, and where is it? And I'll tell you where it is, okay? It is in Devarim, chapter 6, verse 20. And it says, when your son will ask you, and listen to the question, what are those edut, chukim, mishpatim, asher tziva Hashem Elokeinu etchem? Okay? What are those? Edut comes from to be testifying. An ed is a witness. What are those witnesses? Chukim are those statutes which you don't know the reason. This is a chok, we don't know the reason. Mishpatim is don't kill. It's like any court case, any court will say that one isn't allowed to kill or to steal or what the world has. Yeah? Asher tziva Hashem Elokeinu etchem. The pshat seems to be which Hashem has ordered, but it's more. It's more because we are going to say that I'll show you immediately commentaries. Asher tziva. Tziva comes from the word mitzvah. So what is a mitzvah? It's a certain type of mitzvot which are called mitzvah in the Torah. Okay? Hashem, Elokeinu. What are the laws which are connected with Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, which is Hashem? What are the laws which are connected with Elokim, which is Din, etc., etc. So he's asking really 3 types of things. So he can't be an imbecile, because it means he already knows at least that there are so many types of laws, that there is something which is a chok, shatnez, we don't know the reason, pig and basar and halav and things like that. And then you have things like mishpatim, which everybody, or otot, which are signs. Shabbat is an ot hi leolam, ki sheshet yamim asa Hashem. An ot is a sign that Hashem created the world. They have tried many times in history to change the number of days of the week because it doesn't fit a computer. It's an odd number and it doesn't fit. They never managed. The very fact that in Hebrew it's called Shavua, which is the same letters as Sheva, which is 7. It's fascinating. They have never managed to change the numbers of days of the week, which is a miracle. Because if they would have changed, it would be even more difficult to live in Galut. Because like that, the weekend is a weekend. But if it would be 10 days, so 1 week you have to ask your boss to leave on Wednesday because it's Shabbos, and 1 day on Thursday because it's Shabbos, and 1 day on Monday because it's Shabbos, because it would be 10 days and you could not survive. You understand? And you understand all these things. So the Baal Haggadah is creating that it should be a Chacham. And the same thing we have in Shemot, chapter 12, verse 26. And you have, when your son will ask you, Ma ha'avodah hazot lachem? This is a quote in the paragraph. What is his service that you are doing? Lachem, what is it for you? Tak, if he excludes himself, he's a Rasha. I had once somebody that wanted to become Jewish, but she never said we. She always said, how do you do those things? Even after she became, because I was against it, but I didn't. I am not a Beis Din. And they did. She said, how do you do? She never said we. It was such a sign. She lost it. She had done it for political reasons only. And I knew, but they didn't listen to me. It's a very fascinating story that once I can tell you. I was forced to teach her. She was a genius, but she wasn't Jewish at all. You understand? Because she said, Ma ha'avodah hazot lachem. So it's a genius. And what we'll do next time, we will, it's very, very interesting. We will analyze if the answer that the Baal Haggadah is giving is the same as the Torah. When your son will ask you, so here the Baal Haggadah, he says, this must be a Chacham, this must be a Rasha, but the answer won't always be the same. The answer that the Baal Haggadah will give is different answer than the answer that the Torah gives. The third one is tam. What is a tam? They usually translate naive, but it means somebody without complications. Glatt kusher, it's like no questions. And he just says mazot, what is it? So it could be an imbecile, or it could be somebody who says better not to ask too many questions and to just listen to God, whatever. So you call him a tam. Tam could be ish tam yoshev ohalim, which is Yaakov Avinu, who is not at all an imbecile, or it could be somebody who doesn't have questions. And the most genius is the last one. I would have made 3 sons because I find in the Torah 3 times that it says when your son will ask you. But the first one, it doesn't say when your son will ask you. The 4th son, it says, and you will tell your son that he never asked anything. Great, I have a fourth son. The one that doesn't know how to ask questions. You get it? How it's created? It's brilliant. So he explains it already. Everybody understood me? It's known, but it's kedai to repeat it. And I think I will stop today just because I'm so sorry, but I've guessed, but I didn't want to skip the lesson. So I gave them food and I went to teach, but I want to be able to, because they're leaving Israel. And I'll tell you next week when they're not around their story, because it's fascinating, very fascinating. You can imagine. And I have a lot of interesting stories in my life. But the last one is called She'eno Yodea Lishol. He doesn't even know to ask questions. And the Sfat Emet, for example, will say that every one of us has the four sons in us. So it's a symbol. It's not just four types of people, but it's as well four generations which are different. And it's as well in the same person. It's like some people have a beautiful explanation that every one of us has a Rachel and a Leah in us, etc., etc. You get it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you don't mind, I'll stop for today. We did 3/4 of an hour for once, and